Start this. Here we go. We'll go live. Here we go. Wonderful.
Aloha, good morning, everyone.
Good
morning.
All right. Now, here we go. So our devotion this morning is, the theme is action, as in climate action. Share here. I'm gonna mute everyone.
Hoy hijo del hombre, enaltece mi casa para que tú reveles los misterios de mi grandeza y brille sobre ti con la luz de la eternidad. De la eternidad, oh hijo del hombre, oh hijo del hombre. Magnify my cause, that I may reveal unto thee the mysteries of my greatness, and shine upon thee with the light of eternity, with the light of eternity.
Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock.
O my Lord, make thy beauty to be my food, and thy presence my drink, and thy pleasure my hope, and praise of thee my action, and remembrance of thee my companion, and the power of thy sovereignty my succor. And thy habitation my home, and my dwelling place the seat thou hast sanctified from the limitations imposed upon them who are shut out as by a veil from thee. Thou art verily the Almighty, the All-Glorious, the most powerful. Wow.
Prayer and meditation are very important factors in deepening the spiritual life of the individual. But with them must go also action and example, as these are the tangible results of the former. Both are essential. Shukriya Efendi.
And give glad tidings to those who believe and do good works, that for them are gardens beneath which flow streams.
Mind foreruns all conditions. They are mind-made. If one speaks or acts with a wicked mind, because of that, pain follows one. If one speaks or acts with a good mind, because of that, happiness follows one. Buddhism.
The wise sees knowledge and action. The wise sees knowledge and action as one. They see truly.
When you're in doubt, be still and wait. When doubt no longer exists for you, then go forward with courage. So long as mists envelop you, be still. Be still until the sunlight pours through and dispels the mists, as it surely will. Then act with courage.
Therefore, that you strive your actions day by day may be beautiful prayers. Turn towards God and seek always to do that which is right and noble. Enrich the poor, raise the fallen, comfort the sorrowful, bring healing to the sick, reassure the fearful, rescue the oppressed, bring hope to the hopeless, shelter and dusted, the dusted.
Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them.
If we claim to be followers of the light, we must diffuse the light through our actions.
When the good mind came to me with enlightenment, when first I received and became wise with thy words, and though the task be difficult and hardship may come my way, I shall proclaim thy message, which thou declarest to be the best.
Allah does not look at your bodies, nor your forms, but He looks at your hearts and your actions.
Monks, a fool is characterized by her actions. A wise person is characterized by his or her actions. It's through the activities of one's life that one's discernment shines. Buddhism.
Action should culminate in wisdom.
It is not sufficient to pray diligently for guidance, but this prayer must be followed by meditation as to the best methods of action, and then action itself. Even if the action should not immediately produce results, or perhaps not be entirely correct, that does not make so much difference, because prayers can only be answered through action. And if someone's action is wrong, God can use that method of showing the pathway which is right.
O God, O thou who hast cast thy splendor over the luminous realities of men, shedding upon them the resplendent lights of knowledge and guidance, and hast chosen them out of all created things for this supernal grace, and has caused them to encompass all things, to understand their inmost essence, and to disclose their mysteries, bringing them forth out of darkness into the visible world. He verily showeth his special mercy to whomsoever he will. O Lord, help thou thy loved ones to acquire knowledge and the sciences and arts, and to unravel the secrets that are treasured up in the utmost reality of all created beings. Make them to hear the hidden truths that are written and embedded in the heart of all that is. Make them to be ensigns of guidance amongst all creatures, and piercing rays of the mind, shedding forth their light in this, the first light. Make them to be leaders unto thee, guides unto thy path, runners urging men to thy kingdom. Thou verily art the powerful, the protector, the potent, the defender, the mighty, the most generous.
O Lord, unto thee I prepare for refuge, and toward all thy signs I set my heart. O Lord, whether traveling or at home, in my occupation or in my work, I place my whole trust in thee. Mm-hmm. 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 O Lord, unto thee I prepare for refuge, and toward all thy signs I set my heart. O Lord, whether traveling or at home, in my occupation or in my work, I place my whole trust in thee. O
that concludes the prepared portion of the devotion. So now we have a couple minutes for anyone who would like to share devotions. So please feel free to unmute yourself and share any prayers you would feel so moved to share.
Thy name is my healing, oh my God. And remembrance of thee is my remedy, nearness to thee is my hope. And love for thee is my companion, the mercy to me is my healing, my succor, in both this world and the world to come. Thou really art the bountiful, the all-knowing, the all-wise.
He is the compassionate, the all bountiful. O God, my God, thou seest me, thou knowest me. Thou art my haven and my refuge. None have I sought, nor any will I seek, save thee. No path have I trodden, nor any will I tread, but the path of thy love. In the darksome night of despair, my eye turneth expectant and full of hope to the morn of thy boundless favor. And at the hour of dawn, my drooping soul is refreshed and strengthened in remembrance of thy beauty and perfection. He whom the grace of thy mercy aideth, though he be but a drop, shall become the boundless ocean. The merest atom, which the outpouring of thy loving kindness assisteth, shall shine even as the radiant star. Shelter under thy protection, O thou spirit of purity, thou who art the all-bountiful provider, this enthralled and kindled servant of thine. Aid him in this world of being to remain steadfast and firm in thy love, and grant that this broken-winged bird attain a refuge and shelter in thy divine nest that abideth upon the celestial tree.
O thou forgiving Lord, thou art the shelter of all these thy servants. Thou knowest of all secret and art aware of all things. We are all helpless, thou art the mighty, the omnipotent. We are all sinners, and thou art the forgiver of all sins, the merciful, the compassionate. O Lord, look not at our shortcomings, deal with us according to thy grace and thy bounty. Our shortcomings are many, but the ocean of thy forgiveness is boundless. Our weaknesses are grievous, but the evidence of thy aid and assistance are clear. Therefore, confirm and strengthen us. Enable us to do which is worthy in thy holy threshold. Illumine our hearts. Grant us discerning eyes and attentive ears. Resuscitate the dead. Heal the sick. Bestow wealth upon the poor. Give peace and security to the fearful. Accept us in thy kingdom and illumine us with the light of thy guidance. Thou art the powerful and the omnipotent. Thou art the generous. Thou art the clement. And thou art the kind. Abdul Baha.
O my God, thou seest me in my lowliness and weakness, occupied with the greatest undertaking, determined to raise thy word amongst the masses and to spread thy teachings among thy peoples. How can I succeed unless thou assist me with the breath of the Holy Spirit? Help me to triumph by the hosts of thy glorious kingdom and shower upon me thy confirmations, which alone can change a gnat into an eagle, a drop of water into rivers and seas, and an atom into lights and suns. O my Lord, assist me with thy triumphant and effective might, so that my tongue may utter thy praises and attributes amongst all people, and my soul overflow with the wine of thy love and knowledge. Thou art the omnipotent and the doer of whatsoever thou willest.
My God, my adored one, my King, my desire. What tongue can voice my thanks to thee? I was heedless. Thou didst awaken me. I had turned back from thee. Thou didst graciously aid me to turn toward thee. I was as one dead. Thou didst quicken me with the water of life. I was withered. Thou didst revive me with the heavenly stream of thine utterance, which hath flowed forth from the pen of the All-Merciful. O divine providence, all existence is begotten by thy bounty. Deprive it not of the waters of thy generosity, neither do thou withhold it from the ocean of thy mercy. I beseech thee to aid and assist me at all times and under all conditions, and seek from the heaven of thy grace thine ancient favor. Thou art in truth the Lord of bounty and the sovereign of the kingdom of eternity.
Vouchsafe unto me, O my God, the full measure of thy love and thy good pleasure, and through the attraction of thy resplendent light, enrapture our hearts, O thou who art the supreme evidence and all glorified. Send down upon me, as a token of thy grace, thy vitalizing breezes throughout the daytime and in the night season, O Lord of bounty. No deed have I done, O my God, to merit beholding thy face. And I know of a certainty that were I to live as long as the world lasts, I would fail to accomplish any deed such as to diverse, to deserve this favor, inasmuch as the station of a servant shall ever fall short of access to thy holiness, holy precinct, unless thy bounty should reach me, and thy tender mercy pervade me, and thy loving kindness encompass me. All praise be unto thee, O thou besides whom there is none other God. Graciously enable me to ascend unto thee, to be granted the honor of dwelling in thy nearness, and to have communion with thee alone. No God is there but thee. Indeed, shouldst thou desire to confer blessing upon a servant, thou wouldst blot out from the realm of his heart every mention or disposition except thine own mention. And shouldst thou ordain evil for a servant by reason of that which his hand have unjustly wrought before thy face, thou wouldst test him with the benefits of this world and of the next, that he might become preoccupied otherwith, and forget thy remembrance. About.
He is the hope of the world. He is the hope of the world. So go and teach, and teach. This is the time for Baha'u'llah. He is the hope of the people. He is the hope of the people. So go and teach, and teach. This is the time for Baha'u'llah. He is the promised one of all age. He is the promised one of all age. So go and teach, and teach. This is the time for Baha'u'llah. This is the time for Baha'u'llah.
Thank you so very much, everyone. I personally felt that the end of the devotion was geared towards me because it was one of my favorite prayers being read, and then singing that takes me back to my days in East Africa. So that was wonderful. Wonderful. Very moving.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Cadet.
You're
It's always
welcome.
nice. All right. That is wonderful. Okay. So, dear friends, it is Faith and Climate Action Week, which is, it's actually not a week. I think it's 10 days now. So I think they've extended it some week in quotation marks. So we were going to look at the writings, and if my partner in crime is back, aha, there she is, Khotan. All right, Khotan had volunteered to take us through some of these writings. I'm going to send this
I think she was
compilation.
voluntold.
Yeah, she was voluntold. So I'm going to send this compilation in the, I'm going to stick it in the chat.
Okay.
And I'm going to suggest, Khotan, that we start on page 4. Do you want me to share my screen, or do you want to share the screen?
If you wouldn't mind sharing the screen, that would be great.
Perfect. Here we go.
And then we have the document. You want us to go to page 41.
Page 4, right here.
I'm sorry, 4.
Yes, the
Are you sure
environmental
you
crisis.
want me to?
Right.
Okay.
Let me see.
Oh, yes, the environmental crisis. Okay.
Should I zoom in a little bit? Is that good? Does that look good?
Can everyone read that? Yeah, that looks good. And what should we do? Should we go one paragraph at a time?
Yeah,
and
we can
then
go one
stop and
paragraph at a
discuss?
time.
Okay.
Yeah, you know, this is the part where I think we should start, because right now, as everyone knows, how political things can be, anything can be, even science right now.
Yeah.
And how challenging it could be. So this is some guidance from the House of Justice about climate action and our role in it. So
excellent, friends. So why don't I can start reading, and then we'll go one paragraph at a time. Resource use. So this is from the Universal House of Justice in a letter in 2017. So it's quite recent. One of the most pressing problems of humanity in the current century is how a growing, rapidly developing, and not yet united global population can, in a just manner, live in harmony with the planet and its finite resources. Certain biological realities present themselves when an organism negatively affects or exceeds the capacity of its ecosystem. The limited availability and inequitable distribution of resources profoundly impact social relations within and between nations in many ways, even to the point of precipitating upheaval and war. And particular arrangements of human affairs can have devastating consequences for the environment. The question of the impact of climate change and to what extent it is man-made and its effects can be ameliorated is today a major aspect of this larger problem. The revelation of Baha'u'llah, directly and indirectly, touches on a range of such concerns in a manner that speaks to a harmony between society and the natural world. It is essential, therefore, that Baha'is contribute to thought and action regarding such matters. Okay, let's open it up for consultation. What are some thoughts about this paragraph? If you don't mind raising your hand electronically, because I can't see everyone, make sure everybody can contribute. What stands out for you? What does it mean that there are direct and indirect, the revelation of Baha'u'llah directly and indirectly touches on a range of concerns that as they relate to the environment? I have the easy job. I get to ask questions. You guys have to come up with the answers. Arastu, I see you thinking very deeply. What do you think? That's right. You don't look to Rayane.
I was thinking about this other sentence. It says particular arrangements of human affairs can have devastating consequences for the environment. I was thinking of what kind of arrangements of human affairs. I guess one element that pops out is the way we manage the energy production. Like this example of pipeline going through the United States that has been issue with the politicians, whether to build it or not to build it. And then, I read something the other day. It says if we can run this pipeline that carries oil through indigenous lands, why can't we run drinking water for the population in those areas? And that kind of stuck with me because that's so true. There is issues with water supply to some of the areas, even in this country, drinking water. And then that really stuck with me. That's a headline. So I suppose particular human arrangements, one of them is how do we produce energy and how do we really look at the environmental impact of movements of that kind of oil around the country or gas.
Thank you. Laura, go ahead, please.
Well, I guess one of the things that struck me or I've thought about is how unfair it is that the resources are distributed around the world in such a way that some countries are rich with resources and some countries are poor with resources. And because we don't have a global community, those resources aren't shared in an equitable way. And that, has had devastating consequences on places like Africa. And, there are other devastating things that happen to Africa as well. But, it just, unless we have a global community, then I don't think those resources are ever going to be distributed fairly.
So some sort of a system that ensures that the whole planet shares in the resources in an equitable way, that we're not using parts of the world to draw all of the resources so that they can go to other parts of the world for the benefit of a few. Okay. Any other thoughts on this before we go to the next one? Okay, let's go to the next one then, Chris. Who would like to read this one? Go ahead, please unmute yourself and read.
I can read this one.
Thank you.
Human-driven climate change. Scientific inquiry into the question of human contributions to global warming has gradually unfolded over a century of investigation and, more recently, with intense scrutiny. While there will naturally be differences of view among individual scientists, there does exist at present a striking degree of agreement among experts in relevant fields about the cause and the impact of climate change. Sound scientific results obtained through the employment of sound scientific methods produce knowledge that can be acted upon. Ultimately, the outcomes of action must stand the test of further scientific inquiry and the objective facts of the physical world. In the spectrum of issues under discussion, which includes the extent of human contribution, projections of the possible future consequences, and alternatives for response, some aspects are, of course, less supported than others by scientific findings and hence subject to additional critical analysis.
Ayana, go ahead, please.
Something I wanted to say about this, especially in regards to the future, I'm probably the youngest person here today, and I think that this might be something that majorly impacts my future and the future of my whole generation. So it's definitely something that's really scary because of that.
What's so scary about it to you?
Well, just that some climate scientists are saying that it's going to be hard to keep going the way that we're going, just because of how much we're destroying the planet. So I'm just concerned that it's going to get to a point where we won't be able to live on Earth anymore. And that's something that might be an issue later. But I really hope it's not, but it's a possibility to be an issue.
Mm-hmm. It's understandable. It is quite concerning. Any other thoughts about this? It's interesting, sound scientific results obtained through the employment of sound scientific methods. It's an interesting focus continuously in the faith on the scientific process and the investigation of truth. Yes, Arastu Rayane and Rayane. Yes.
So I think, both these paragraphs, looking at it, is, to me, at the core of this is the spiritual development, that without us developing spiritually or abiding by spiritual principles, it becomes very difficult. And I think it gets us to the point that we are at right now, or the whole world is at, is that we have advanced technologically and scientifically quite significantly, but that advancement in the spiritual values has not kept up. And I think that is where, as Baha'is, we play a significant role in terms of, I can think of the Institute process in itself that really points out to the spiritual development of man. And so the more we can contribute to that development, the sooner we can resolve issue or contribute towards solutions for the problems that we face. I think, with this arrangement of human affairs in the first one, the fact that we ship our recycling material and trash halfway across the world, thinking that, well, as long as it doesn't impact us immediately, it's out of sight, out of mind, but it is creating havoc in other parts of the world. So how do we balance that? The same thing with all the points that are in here. I think it has to do with opening eyes and helping society open up its spiritual eye, because therein lies the solution. Then we make decisions based on spiritual principles, not based on who makes more money.
And sort of the so-called NIMBY group, not in my backyard. Everyone is like, no, thank you. We don't want any of this in our backyard. So what are the solutions then? Okay, let's go to the next one then. Who would like to read Limits to Growth? Let's see who's on the call. Jane, are you here?
Yes, I can read. Thank you.
Thank you.
Limits to growth. A challenge of similar nature faces economic thinking as a result of the environmental crises. The fallacies and theories based on the belief that there is no limit to nature's capacity to fulfill any demands made on it by human beings have now been coldly exposed. A culture which attaches absolute value to expansion, to acquisition, and to the satisfaction of people's wants is being compelled to recognize that such goals are not, by themselves, realistic guides to policy. Inadequate, too, are approaches to economic issues whose decision-making tools cannot deal with the fact that most of the major challenges are global rather than particular in scope. And that's for the prosperity of humankind, Baha'i International Community, Office of Public Affairs Information.
Thank you. What is this one? What does it say for you?
I think Netflix has a documentary on what's happening to the oceans. The way we fish. I think it's a reference to, we think that there is unlimited supply of fish in the oceans, and the way the methods that are employed, essentially they're sweeping by the way the fisheries, the fishing is done. You're sweeping the bottom of the ocean, and millions of sea creatures are essentially killed. Some of it is not even consumed because they are not consumable. So pretty soon, that concept of unlimited availability of fish is going to be a challenge for the humanity. So if you have a chance to watch that documentary on Netflix, I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I watched that documentary as well, and then I felt guilty for serving my cat some cat food that had fish in it that evening. One of the things I'm glad you brought up the documentary, because it raised some issues that we're struggling with as humanity, particularly when we're looking in terms of science, was understanding our impact on the environment and what really is happening. Because you read that, and for example, I watched that documentary. One of the things that was discussed was the amount of, we hear about the plastic in the ocean, right? And I didn't know, but according to that documentary, and I need to verify it, but he was saying the majority of that plastic is byproduct from fishing, right? Most of it is like fishing nets, fishing stuff, and that plastic. And he mentioned how right now there's this big push for things like paper straws and stuff, which sounds nice in theory, but in some ways, the problem is so much bigger, right? And we're focusing on this little thing that's like 0.008%, right? Like, how do we address the big issues? Little issues are important as well, but how do we get the big issues in a way that's effective, and how much pushback is there in the world against that kind of thing? And he was kind of examining some of the things, even some of the things that were kind of shocking was, how the label dolphin safe tuna doesn't really mean much, right? And we've known this, we've gone through this thing that sometimes you read things that if something says something's natural, doesn't necessarily mean much, right? and we have to kind of like really examine what these things mean and how it affects us and that sort of thing. Yeah, it was really interesting. And so I find it sometimes frustrating because I'm always trying to figure out what can I do to make a difference, right? And then you think, oh, I'll do this. Like, we brought up recycling before. And then like, I think it was PBS Frontline or somebody did a big special on recycling and how terrible it is in some ways. Not terrible to recycle, but like just the whole business is, they're shipping stuff overseas, putting it in big piles. Sometimes it's catching on fire. Right, there's all these things, and you're like, oh man, and so even things like I know at least one of us on here drives a hybrid car, right? Like I have to make the decision. I'm like, is it more environmentally friendly for me to get rid of one of my cars and turn it into a hybrid, or should I keep my car longer because I don't drive that much right now, especially, and not use the resources for a new car, right? And so you're trying to make like, what's the carbon impact? What's the environmental impact? What should I do?
Equation can make you crazy because it's
I know. And then people get into arguments, and then you get these arguments about like, oh, don't do that, don't do this, right? And it's like, well, we have to do something, right? So
we have to do something. So, Nabil, what is that comment you put in chat? Where is Nabil? What does that mean? Go ahead. You're muted.
Oh, no. And I can't raise my hand because I've been made a co-host. So I put some other reaction there.
Okay.
No, I was just being silly. But no.
What does it say? Dolphin safe, tuna's what? Probably.
I was just cracking a joke there that the dolphins never harmed the tuna. Or the tuna never harmed the dolphin. Anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, on the point that Chris is bringing up, that it runs sort of in the same direction as sort of like the frugal mind, right? Frugality is being cheap is also implies like not consuming too many resources, meaning you seek to repair rather than to replace. You seek to reuse rather than to get more things and then have to figure out what to do with them. So there is that. I guess that was just a thought.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think there are groups now all over Austin where I don't remember what they're called. Some sort of an exchange where
buy nothing
group where nobody buys anything. They just share with each other what they have. Sort of a exchange barter with your neighbors in your neighborhoods. What a cool idea. So if you need clothes, you get it from somebody else, or dishes, or whatever it is that you want to barter away. Those things like that are popping up. And then also I know there's some practices where people don't buy anything unless they give away as many things as they buy. So like, if they're going to buy new articles of clothes, if they're buying 2 things, they give away 2 things from their closet. And so that there's this process of not hoarding, not gathering a lot, but that there's a flow, inflow, outflow. And I think those that have had they have children, they probably share clothes and resources among children, right? So this is not a weird or strange idea, like giving clothes from older siblings to younger siblings. Okay, consumerism, that's what we're talking about.
Perfect segue.
Perfect segue. So who would like to read this section? Go ahead, please.
I'll read it.
Okay.
Consumerism, consumer culture. Today's inheritor by default of materialism's gospel of human betterment is unembarrassed by the ephemeral nature of the goals that inspire it. For the small minority of people who can afford them, the benefits it offers are immediate and the rationale unapologetic. Emboldened by the breakdown of traditional morality, the advance of the new creed is essentially no more than the triumph of animal impulse. As instinctive and blind as appetite, released at long last from the restraints of supernatural sanctions, its most obvious casualty has been language. Tendencies once universally cascaded as moral failings mutate into necessities of social progress. Selfishness becomes a prized commercial resource. Falsehood reinvents itself as public information. Perversions of various kinds unabashedly claim the status of civil rights. Under the appropriate euphemisms, greed, lust, indolence, pride, even violence acquire not merely broad acceptance, but social and economic value. Ironically, as words have been drained of meaning, so have the very material comforts and acquisitions which truth has been casually sacrificed.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. What a paragraph. I had to look up indolence. It means laziness. At least that's what I found online. Wow, what a paragraph. So what stands out for you? It's interesting. Gospel of human betterment, default of materialism, ephemeral nature and goals that inspire it. So it sounds like it's much more animal impulse driven than spiritual. What does this mean to you guys? Any thoughts? Karen, what do you think about this? Karen Hopkins.
Hey, sorry, I'm making omelets as I'm talking.
Can you go back?
I'm listening. No, I think this is a great conversation, and it is true. I think that there's kind of been a proliferation too. I think even more so during the pandemic of, I've been watching a lot of these makeover shows where they completely redesign someone's kitchen or something, but so far I haven't seen any that are kind of ecologically minded. What is the cost of all this, that we need the latest, newest thing, and also kind of the payoff between art and how we aspire to live versus how that impact it has on the greater society and our environment. So that's one thing that's coming to mind as I watch these interior design shows.
Yep, I totally understand. Wonderful. Thank you for that feedback. What stands out for me also is this gospel of human betterment, that it's continuously trying to better ourselves without realizing what that actually means. So do we take all the resources to better ourselves, or what? It's so interesting that somehow it's creating some cognitive dissonance in my mind. Like, wait, human betterment somehow being attached to animal impulses rather than spiritual path. Laura, go ahead, please.
Let's see. So, my thoughts were along the line of consumerism as being, almost like it's like you're getting your fix, but it's not
you're getting your fix.
It's not a spiritual fix, but as you consume, for a small period of time, whether it's a piece of cake or it's a new kitchen, you feel good, and then that goes away and you're kind of left with that sort of emptiness that really can only be filled by, that spiritual connection with other human beings and God. So yeah, this is just another one of these, issues that, this seems very depressing to look down this list of.
Yeah.
But the one thing that I hold as hope, besides the Baha'i faith, is that human beings are infinitely smart. And they've already solved all these problems. These problems are addressable. Yeah. But again, we don't have the global structure and the willingness to do what has to be done. But they're solvable.
The will and the structure to solve this problem. Yes, Arastu Ryanek, go ahead, please.
You know, I often think about this consumerism, and there is nothing good about it because you're using the basic materials in the world that are limited, and then you're creating junk. But then the flip side of it that is bothering is that if you stop consumerism, then thousands and thousands of people will lose their jobs. So I think this, when a system is broken from the very foundation, it's very difficult to fix part of it. Because stopping consumerism, if you don't want to impact the jobs, then the element that has to come with it is that you only work 20 hours a week so that there is jobs for everybody. They produce, the less is produced, everybody has a job, so everybody economically is supported. And then you stop the consumerism as well. So, you know, in a lot of issues, just like Chris mentioned, even in waste, creating waste, you have this, you know, opposing forces. And the reason these opposing forces exist because all the elements that the world is based on is crooked, is not right. You know, the very foundation is not straight. You know, so everything you build on it, it's not going to come out right. You know, this opposing forces exist because of the way the system is built.
Yeah, exactly. And that speaks to the next paragraph, actually. Beautiful segue, because there are technical solutions and underlying root causes and issues. So what do you actually fix? The quick fixes or underlying fixes? And then do we do it both at the same time? How does that work? How do we make sure things don't actually fall apart? But we're fixing things. Okay, let's see. Who would like to read the next one? Spiritual and principled responses to the environmental crisis.
I can read.
Go ahead, please.
It is our conviction that any call to global action for environment and development must be rooted in universally accepted values and principles. Similarly, the search for solutions to the world's grave environmental and developmental problems must go beyond technical utilitarian proposals and address the underlying causes of the crisis. Genuine solutions in the Baha'i view will require a globally accepted vision for the future based on unity and willing cooperation among the nations, races, creeds, and classes of the human family. Commitment to a higher moral standard, equality between the sexes, and the development of consultative skills for the effective functioning of groups at all levels of society will be essential. Statement by the Baha'i International Community to the Preparatory Committee of the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. UNICEF 1991.
1991. Wonderful. So what stands out for you?
Oh, I'm sorry, that's Preparatory Committee.
Preparatory, yes. Wow, that's very interesting. So what is essential is commitment to a higher moral standard, equality between the sexes, development of consultative skills for effective functioning of groups at all levels. That's one of the challenges, is how to actually talk to each other, how to investigate truth individually and in groups. And if we can't even be in the same space to consult with each other, it's very hard to come up with solutions because it just doesn't go anywhere. One group pulls in one direction, another group pulls in another direction. Any thoughts about this?
I just wanted to say, I think the last two paragraphs for me and the last comment that was made kind of points to the fact that you can't do it piece by piece. That it's going to require a whole new, revelation, because as he pointed out, if you change one thing, you have a vast impact on society. And then you just have to rush to fix that. But if you look at it as a whole system with consultation and do a collective action, you know, you'll be able to mitigate some of the worst impacts of fixing one area over the other.
Okay.
So.
Thank you. Very good. Interesting. It's just so interesting to look at it in this way, that it's not, it has to be this way or that way. It's leaving it to the maturity of humanity to figure this out based on higher standards, higher moral standards, and a process that is very inclusive of everyone. Yeah, Rayana, go ahead, please.
I was going to say that it's, I mean, what I find very promising is that, you know, the Baha'i world has had 25 years of working in this direction, of engaging the wider community in conversation towards, you know, coming up with solutions. Because, you know, when you, especially in this paragraph, when we read this, we know, I think it's very obvious to every Baha'i that true solution will only come as that true consultation takes place with unity and oneness of mankind as the foundation of it. When that oneness is the foundation, then everything, when consultation takes place based upon that foundation, then solutions are found. So it's very exciting to see how the Baha'i world, throughout the world, has been working in this direction to engage the wider society into this pattern of thinking in order to come up with solutions. So I think we are, you know, as depressing as some of these paragraphs may sound, I think it's important to remember that there is amazing things that are happening in the world towards coming up with solutions. I just wanted to highlight that.
Thank you. Thank you. Wonderful. And then the next one is even, so it's going from the individual, it keeps getting bigger, to the system. And now, my goodness, this one has one of the quotes that is the underpinning of my current understanding of this whole process. It's all about unity. It's interesting, Baha'u'llah talks about this is a day of justice. And the purpose of justice is to lead to unity. It's not an end into itself, that it's there to lead to something even bigger. And here we're going to look at that. Who would like to read that paragraph? Anyone wants to read this one? I can read this one. Unity is essential if diverse peoples are to work toward a common future. The Earth Charter might well identify those aspects of unity which are prerequisites for the achievement of sustainable development. In the Baha'i view, quote, this is a quote from Baha'u'llah, the well-being of mankind, its peace and security are unattainable unless and until its unity is firmly established. It's very interesting how it's stacked. The well-being, peace, security are unattainable until its unity is firmly established first. So what do we solve for? And the Earth Charter, Chris put, is an international declaration of fundamental values and principles for society in 21st century. So this is an interesting stacking. So what do we work on first? Or how is this, do we work on all of it at the same time? Do we work on one part and it leads to another? What do you all think?
Justice, maybe?
Justice? How does that work? Like, what do you mean by that? Justice for?
Well, I was thinking out loud, actually, but if justice is the prerequisite for unity, and of course, right now with the Black Lives Matter, you see how we have to address that in order to create an American unity. So there are many people who are suffering around the globe. They're oppressed. And so I was just thinking out loud that if the foundation of unity is justice, then all nations must look at their affairs and determine how to create more justice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's an excellent point, because we see right now, for example, with vaccine availability, there is not equity there, but there are, of course, efforts to try and make that more equitable. But it kind of parallels what we're talking about here in terms of the environment as something that is of global concern. This pandemic as well. Having a conversation with a random person we ran into at near the boardwalk yesterday, and it was just a young man who was quit his job and was about to go travel around and intending to go to grad school, but he made the comment that of course is most people would probably agree with, that the pandemic will not end until the whole world has been given due attention, and so this is not something you can just say, well, we fixed it in this part of the world, and just kind of like what the previous quotes were talking about. You can't just look at this area because it transcends boundaries, and we are so interconnected. So the fact that we have to have justice and equity around the world, that will help bring about unity. Now, the people have to sign on to this whole concept, right? They have to come to this realization of the oneness of mankind, and that once you do that, then you cannot countenance there to be injustice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
I feel like this whole pandemic has been like a warning shot of climate crisis. Like, hey, this is something that affects everybody, no matter what your background is, right? And it can really instantly affect everyone. And you need a global response to it. And every time I read more about climate science and what needs to be done, and like I was just watching a special on polar bears 2 days ago, and the problem of how the ice is going back, and they're having more and more trouble finding ice sheets for the polar bears to kind of like swim on and get seals and stuff. And so now some more polar bears are moving south, and they're breeding with grizzly bears, and they call them growler bears, right? And so they're these bears that eat everything. Right?
Oh my God.
I'm like, guys, this is pretty scary.
It sounds like Godzilla in the making.
Growler bears. Yeah, exactly. But you hear these things of how all these things are affecting everyone, and like the pandemic seems like it shows us conclusively how quickly something like this can spread all around the world, and how it does take global action. The question is, how can we have these conversations? Because a couple of times consultation was mentioned and stuff, and one of the things that I've been frustrated with is that not enough news outlets in the US are talking about the global issues surrounding vaccinations and response to COVID, right? So I have to go to foreign sources, and I'm seeing them talk about these issues and the struggle they're having, for example, all over Africa. Like, you never think about how hard it is to deliver a vaccine that needs to be refrigerated to all parts of the developing world. I mean, that's hard. It's a hard thing to do. If there's a village that, you have to, ride in the back of a truck for a couple hours to get to, can you imagine trying to bring a refrigerated vaccine there? It's almost impossible, right? These issues just aren't talked enough about, particularly in countries like ours, where we have so much, we have plenty, and gives us this illusion of comfort, right? And we don't really have to think about all those people over there, whether it's, in the global South or someplace, and, we just put them out of mind. But it's a serious issue, and it becomes even more of a serious issue when, I was watching one report, and it was naming like the countries that were trying to help, right? And bring vaccines to the South, and how those countries will respond in the future to other countries they perceive as not helping enough, right? Like you get this, so you set yourself up for these clashes, right, of resentment and stuff. So it's very interesting to watch this whole process go and see what is going to be the next dialogue. Are we going to be able to talk about this and say, hey, you think the pandemic was bad? Here's the climate thing coming up in 10 years. We're hitting some tipping points. What are we going to do?
Yeah, we don't even have to wait 10 years. Look at Snowvid in Texas, the power grid failure or near failure, and that the challenges that we had with that. And there was just another announcement recently that the grid is not doing as well as it should because it was designed for one thing and everything's sort of shifting, and environmentally at least. Who would have thought we would have that kind of snowstorm in Texas? They think it's coming more often and the extremes of weather might be happening more often. But to your point, Chris, it made me think of, there was a documentary I watched. I'm trying to remember the name of it. It had to do with wolves in Yellowstone Park. And they said that how creating the environment where the wolves could flourish actually helped bring the rivers back, which was like, what? That was so interesting. So the rivers flowed in a certain way originally when the population of the wolves was high and flourishing. Then as their population dwindled, the river changed its course. And then now that the wolves are back, the river went back to its original. It's just, I would have never put those two things together. So there are unintended consequences that we can't even see that are part of the ecosystem in a holistic way that adjust themselves to each other, like the polar bears and other things. The reintroduction of the flourishing wolves in Yellowstone or other things that might be. But another point, what happened to the environment during the shutdown, the global shutdown? That's going to be interesting to see. What has been the impact of it? Then we can see what our true impact as the human activity is on our environment. When we had to slow down, stop, do less of, did we see any part of the environment come back, heal? What has, and I don't know if anybody knows that on this call, or if you know where we can find that information. Anyway, let's see, we have 10 minutes. Laura, you have some thoughts about that. Go ahead, please.
I was just going to add to the wolves, two things. The wolves in Yellowstone. The other thing that happened when they brought the wolves back to Yellowstone was that the coyote population went way down and came back into balance again, because once the wolves were gone, the coyote population went way up. And then the thing about the impact on the lockdown, I mean, I think, we heard the news reports about how Beijing, for the first time, was the pollution, the air pollution there was so much less that people were able to kind of breathe freely for the first time in a long time. So, and how the cars, here, all the pollution from the cars in the big cities went way down. So we know that we can have a huge impact on various aspects of our environment.
Thank you. So let's look at the next paragraph. What is the key for formulating effective action? Let's see what it says. So who would like to read this one?
I can read it.
Thank you.
Religion, therefore, offers a vital source of commitment to new and potentially challenging patterns of daily life. It is notable that religious leaders and faith-based organizations have been increasingly active on environmental and justice issues as they relate to climate change. But religious conviction does not automatically translate into service to the common good. It is entirely possible, for example, to have a congregation of well-intentioned adherents whose actions do little to contribute to the betterment of society. Clearly, there is much to learn about how noble ideals become expressed in committed, sustained action. In this sense, religious communities can be understood as communities of practice in which spiritual teachings are translated into social reality. Within them, a process of capacity building that enables people of all backgrounds to participate in the transformation of society can be set in motion. How this unfolds in different contexts and cultures promises to be an area of rich exploration for all working on sustainability issues. Should I continue?
Please, yes.
Identifying the spiritual principles at the root of ecological challenges can also be key in formulating effective action. Principles that humanity constitutes but a single people, for example, or that justice demands universal participation in the work of sustainable development, reflect the rich complexity of human nature. Just as importantly, they help foster the will and the aspiration needed to facilitate the implementation of pragmatic measures. Identifying the principles underlying given issues and formulating action in light of their imperatives is therefore a methodology that all can benefit from and contribute to, those in traditionally religious roles, but also leaders of government, the corporate sector, civil society, and others involved in the formulation of public policy. A rich and deepening consciousness of the oneness of humankind is the only way that the obstacles inherent in dichotomies like rich, poor, north, south, developed, developing can be overcome. Designations of this kind are not without basis, for some countries do have more financial resources than others. But while such realities are not to be denied, neither should they be allowed to paralyze constructive action. Rather, they should be incorporated into the perspective that an integrated, sustainable, and prosperous world will not be built by us working together with them, but by all of us working on behalf of everyone.
Powerful. And that's from the Baha'i International Shared Vision, Shared Volition, Choosing Our Global Future Together document from 2015. Wow, what do you think about that? In the 5 minutes we have left, let's see if we can unpack that a little bit. What stands out for you all? There's so much in this. Erin, what are your thoughts about this? What stands out for you?
I'm still thinking about the last sentence about us working together with them, but by all of us working on behalf of everyone. And unfortunately, sometimes I think in terms of like America and more developed countries, things like this pandemic and even, you know, the Austin snowpocalypse when no one had electricity and everyone was suffering, no matter your socioeconomic class, race, whatever. I think those types of things sometimes are kind of what it takes to make us feel like all of us rather than us, those with, or I mean, helping them, those without, you know.
Thank you. That's such a hard thing. The persistence of the illusion or the delusion of separateness is just so persistent. My goodness. And to break through that, we come to this realization of oneness, but then we don't know how to operationalize it, as it were, right? How to make it work so that it works for everybody. Yet here we are in religious communities, Baha'i community included. We have the opportunity at the grassroots to keep building the foundation for justice and unity continuously in what we believe, what we do, how we plan, how we conduct our personal lives, our community life, our institutions. Wonderful. Any last thoughts, you guys? Anyone else has any thoughts? Nahijun, what are your thoughts about this?
Hey, well, I mean, I'm kind of reflecting on the first paragraph that mentions the direct and indirect. I feel like it's a combination of internal, we reflecting ourselves and changing our own behavior, and then, analyze and understand the rules and policies that will affect everyone, including us as a part of a bigger community. And there is really, it's hard to come up with an immediate solution for all of this. I was thinking of electric cars, for example, or because somebody was talking about buying a car and all that. But, it seems like there was a shift in the production of these cars, as you see major changes have occurred, and most major manufacturer now contribute a big percentage of their production to the or the resources to the production of the electric cars now, because there's more demand. And we just have to understand at what point did this shift has occurred. It's for immediate need. It is a effort that combines job production, environmental issues, all of those combined in order to sustain this. And I feel like for other needs related to our environment, we have to think globally. We have to think, about consulting with all countries and understanding, having in mind their needs as well as ours. I was thinking of the vaccination. I obviously Moderna, some other manufacturer, Pfizer's and all that. I feel like United States government spends massive amount of money purchasing these vaccines to meet their goals. But you have to understand that these manufacturers have a capacity, a finite capacity, and therefore they cannot supply vaccines to other countries. So here we are thinking of ourselves, meeting our goals, and yet, all the travelers who are coming from other communities, countries are going to, continue with the spread of the virus. So it's that kind of a mindset that is, kind of puts us in trouble in every regard. So.
Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, my goodness. I was talking to someone over Zoom in Germany, and their husband is a physician. They said that even as a physician frontline worker, he could not get the vaccine because they didn't have the vaccine supply in Germany. Everything was being exported to the US. And of course, other parts, friends in Iran were saying the same thing. And Canada, someone I know there, of course, they're also physicians, and they said they could not get the vaccine until a couple of weeks ago because it's all being exported.
Yeah, I think.
So how do you manage that?
Yeah, I heard isn't Toronto like in the midst of like a third wave because of lack of access to vaccines and stuff? Like and they're pretty upset about it, and understandably, I would be pretty upset about it as well. And very, yeah, it's very tough. It's very challenging. It's this, and some of these quotes mentioned it before, just this tendency towards selfishness, to the self. It's just so great in that animal instinct. It's like, I want to take care of me, so how do you channel that energy? At least we can channel some of that energy, because some of that energy is selfishness towards our children, right? And so we want our children to have a better world. So you can channel some of that energy through that and be like, okay, so what is the world you want for your children? How do we get to that? So I think about that all the time with Turner, I try my best to teach him how to work on stuff, to fix stuff, going back to that whole thing versus repair versus new. Like, I make sure he knows how to fix things. Like I tell the story of sees me working my cars, and one time when he was about 4, he was kind of like running around. I was like, "Hey Turner, why don't you take your tool set, his little toy toolbox, why don't you get your tool set and go fix your train table?" So he goes up to the table, and I thought he would just stand next to it and hit it with a hammer. No, he slides underneath it like I slide underneath the cars, right? He slides underneath it, takes a wrench, starts like pretending to work on it, and then drops it. It goes, "Ow, ow!" Completely imitating me, like hurting myself.
You have to be careful.
He learned from the best.
He learns from the best.
He did. But it is important to me. And those of us who lived in the developing world for any period of time, we talk about the culture of repair, right? I mean, that's something that's it's a cultural thing that we've just gotten rid of. Like, we just throw things out. If your electronics break, you throw it out, which is so frustrating to me. I still have my cell phone from 3 phones ago that has a removable battery because I can use it as a remote control for all my TVs. But it's still good because I can put a new battery in it. I don't have to pry open glue and stuff. It just changing that culture would be huge. There was a Baha'i who was working on a product of a modular phone that was that kind of thing, and where you could just replace it. So, for example, you could pull it apart, and if you got a new camera, you could just pull out the camera and put in a higher resolution camera. And that thing's kind of a revolutionary thought, right? But the consumer culture right now is we want everything thinner, smaller, newer. The idea of replacing your battery or your camera, it didn't flow. It just didn't go with our consumer culture. And that's the thing we have to change.
It makes me wonder, because a couple of things come to mind. One is that there are some people, pragmatic people, who have some fear that if we are not careful, the quality of life in America will drop considerably, or there is a threat to our national security, that other countries will, we're trying to protect ourselves. And the sense that America's exceptionalism in the world and its role as a economic leader in the world since Second World War, especially, and that it needs to, there's that mindset of, if you're in a plane and if you're in turbulence, you put the mask on yourself first so that you can help others. So it's not all a very selfish approach, but some is, how can we step up to the role that was either bestowed upon America or that it stepped into, whatever that might be. And in this changing global environment, it needs to stay very strong and competitive so that it can do its work. So there is also that approach. I want to make sure that that voice is heard. And so what do you do in an environment that you have the best of intentions, you want to make sure that it's a fair global system, but the system is set up the way that it currently. So how do you then, where does change come in? Is it at every level? Is it at the grassroots level? And then what are the companion changes that happen? Like we talked about the wolves in Yellowstone that affected the coyotes, that affected the river. Everything is interconnected with each other. I think that, and then that being, so the consumerism, America is in huge debt. We're in huge deficit because the consumerism of America is keeping, some would argue, the world economic system afloat because we're the ones that keep buying stuff. So what happens on a practical level when that changes, and how should it change? So if we move from replace to repair, and so there's also all of those things to consider. But it's interesting that Baha'u'llah keeps talking about the underlying, the meta issues, as it were, which are the spiritual reality. It's how we see the world, how we think about the world, how we exist in the world. What do we think is our role? And what is it that we don't confuse it with? It was really it hit me really hard in one of those paragraphs we were reading, that sometimes under the guise of self-betterment, it's just all animal nature manifesting itself. So what's the balance? And that is what I hear the Baha'i faith provides, the balance. This is the balance in which you weigh everything. Does it fit within justice? Does this manifest unity through justice? Is this a spiritually minded approach? Because Abdu'l-Baha keeps encouraging us to walk the spiritual path with practical feet. How do we do that so that Anyway, just I wanted to make sure that voice was also heard in the discussion. When we say everybody in, we really mean everybody in. We don't mean only people who believe things the way we do or see the world the way we do.
I just wanted to chime in here. I'm sorry if this was brought up already because I had to leave the conversation for a little while to eat breakfast with my family. But
wonderful.
I just wanted to mention that I think when we talk, there's a lot of discussion, of course, about what's the best economic system. And we've been having this discussion in our family. My son's really interested in communism and socialism. But I think kind of through those conversations, we've talked about what the products of that economy are. What is the economy producing? And I think we kind of have blinders on that we have to produce things. What are the products of our economic system? Are the products of our economic system more clothes or cars or pieces of plastic, or is it scientific breakthroughs or medicine? Is it things that are our brain that can better our society? Or I always think about, I spent a little time in Guatemala, and the markets there, they have all these flowers are like a major commodity there. The people there use flowers in a variety of ways. Like they just have a lot of value. And so I'm like, wow, this is like an economic system that's partially based on flowers. I mean, people trade them. So that's the thing is you have to realize is the products of an economic system can be based on many different things. And so what do we want our society, our economy to be producing? And what kind of value are we going to place on those products?
Yes. Yes, very good point. I think some of us want chocolate to be part of that economic production and what we're producing. But Karen, that's such a sophisticated approach to economics. What are we producing and what value does it have? And so now we are in the fourth industrial age, as so it's called, the age of information and AI and coming technologies. And so we're moving at a very fast rate, fast pace, whether willingly, unwillingly, towards something very different. Our societies are going to look very different in a few decades. So how is that balanced with our values? And what kind of values does that world require? Are we, Abdu'l-Baha keeps talking about making sure, even with science and discoveries, that they have to be based in spirituality, or that their byproduct is not going to be very productive, useful. It could be quite harmful to societies. We have to be very cognizant of that. What a great discussion today, you guys. Thank you, Chris, for choosing this topic. Or how did the topic come up? What a great topic.
Oh yeah, it's Climate Action Week. So
oh yeah, that's right. 10 days.
It's funny. I asked our resident climate action people to talk, but everyone
and they said no, thanks.
Field is pretty busy right now this time of year. Apparently, Tanya Homayon, she this is a huge deal for
the legislature.
For the birds this time of year, and Port Charles is in the middle of doing the grants and stuff and everything. Yeah. So all people are related to climate. I just learned that April is like one of the toughest months for them, So I started calling other people, and everyone's like, booked up. April is a rough month for
April's a rough month, but no, this is great. What a great discussion. And we only got through a certain piece of it. And it's so amazing to have these discussions around it. Maybe we can continue at some point. This was so much fun.
Right.
Such a great learning. Any last minute thoughts before I think we could probably stop the live stream and then have the after show. I think, is that what it's called? The after party?
Yes.